We're live.
Good
Hello,
evening.
everybody.
Talk at once, okay? Hi, everybody. This is Debbie Bird Smith. I'm here with Ron Ray and our very special guest, Daniel O'Connor.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're thrilled to have you, and we haven't seen you for a while. So I know you've been very busy with this book that we're going to talk about tonight. So if you could, would you start us off with a prayer, and then we can jump right into it and start talking about it?
Absolutely.
A
In
lot
the
to
name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. In the divine will, we come before you, O Lord, conscious of our nothingness and our misery, asking your mercy upon us. We ask that you grant us the gift of your will, for we give you our wills completely without reservation. We ask that you allow us to delve into the very center of the divine will, and that for myself and Ron and Debbie here, that you will give us the grace to speak all of your words and only your words, in your will and not ours, for your glory and not ours, as we pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Our Lady, Queen of Heaven, pray for us. Saint Joseph, pray for us. Saint Isaac, Jogues, and companions, pray for us.
Pray for us.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Well, and tonight, the title, what we want to talk about tonight is heralding the Antichrist and the many falsities and misconceptions and much that's flying around about not only the Antichrist, but in particular demons and appearing as aliens and this whole alien deception that we've been just kind of inundated with recently. And it's been certainly a topic of interest of many people. There's many misconceptions. There's some disagreement among theologians about, what does the church say? What is real? What isn't? And Daniel has written a very comprehensive and book, encyclopedia.
Oh, library. If you need a self-defense thing to beat criminals with, when they come into your book, use the binding side and smack them on the head with it.
Keep them in your car in case of attack. No, it's called Only Man Bears His Image, and we've been anticipating this book for quite some time. Daniel's been working very diligently on this project for some time, and I know that he has lots of information to share with us and lots of insight to share with us. So Daniel, why don't you just start by telling us what really prompted you to write this book and delve so deeply into this topic?
It was, a few years ago is when I've been working on compiling all this research and doing all this reading for almost 3 years now, because it was around that time in 2020 and the beginning of 2021. This is not something I ever really thought about before. But I noticed just more and more infiltration of this expectation of alien contact and alien saviors, this infiltration of that idea into the church, and not just into the church, not just into the wildly dissenting voices we're used to hearing garbage from, but supposedly Orthodox-minded theologians just announcing this from the rooftops and begging everyone. And this getting even the Pope kind of giving some. Although I have a appendix on Pope Francis, and I actually don't think he believes in aliens, but he had some problematic comments, as sometimes is the case. And the Vatican certainly really seeming to endorse this deception. And I don't mean the magisterium, of course, that's protected by Jesus Christ, but the men in the Vatican, the astronomers in the Vatican, welcoming this idea of extraterrestrials and telling us that, oh yeah, it's fine. And some of them going so far as to say that they're here. One theologian, this is from actually several years before, though, by the name of Monsignor Corrado Barducci, he went off the deep end with this ufology, ETs, aliens are coming to save us stuff, and he's never really been exposed. Unfortunately, he wreaked so much havoc in the church in the 90s and the early 2000s when he was active. He died in 2008, God rest his soul. But I've got a very definitive refutation of him in this book as well. But anyway, it's really the infiltration of this ideology into the church that inspired me. That there needs to be a Catholic treatment of this. There's been a lot of evangelical Protestants really sounding the alarm about this very well. There's been Eastern Orthodox priests, theologians really well, and bishops, Eastern Orthodox bishops even sounding the alarm about this really zealously, very well. But it's been kind of a deafening silence from the Catholic scene, as in respect to warning against this. There are plenty of Catholics endorsing it, unfortunately, but there had been no real comprehensive Catholic rebuttal of this alien deception. So I knew I had to provide that, and that's what I've been pouring unbelievable amounts of time into the last couple of years. And finally, I have the result of it all here in the book.
And Daniel, I just wanted to mention, I just want to congratulate you first of all, because it's just an amazing book and it's just so comprehensive. It's really a compendium of all Catholic thoughts on aliens and extraterrestrial life. One of the chapters that in the book is about the church's actual condemnation of aliens, and that's called Pope Saint Zachary's condemnation of the abominable teaching of aliens. And I was quite surprised. I didn't really know about that. Would you mind telling us a bit more about that?
Yeah, and and by the way, just so everyone watching knows, that I'm having some audio and mic issues, and I can hear myself booming in my ears. I'm having a hard time hearing Ron and Debbie a bit. So if it seems like I'm ignoring anything they say, I promise I'm not ignoring them. It's because I didn't hear it. I'm having earbud issues here. But anyway, yeah, so the church, you consult just about any of the professional Catholic mainstream sources today, and they'll say, oh, this is irrelevant to the faith. There's no Catholic teaching on it whatsoever. Believe whatever you want. And that's just not even close to true. This has been an issue since the beginning of the church, because the ancient Greek pagans, they believed in aliens, a number of them, not all of them. Some of them, like Plato and Aristotle, were very against the idea. But the atheistic and materialistic pre-Socratic philosophers, who I teach about every semester to my undergraduates, especially Democritus with his atomism, his materialistic atomism, his brand of early atheism, really, they were big on the belief in a plurality of inhabited worlds. Earth was just one of them. So that was the word that was the name for alien belief back then. They didn't call it aliens or extraterrestrials. They called it plurality doctrine. And that was huge in ancient paganism. So this isn't at all new, but what is new is the embrace of it in the church. The fathers of the church, every single one who commented on this, condemned it. We got St. Augustine, St. Jerome, Hippolytus, Philastrius. So these are canonized saints and doctors and fathers of the church, every single one of them who even brought up this idea of aliens. They resolutely condemned it, with one exception, Origen, the church father Origen. And yes, he said some great things too. But guess what? He was condemned as a heretic for this very reason. And yes, there were a number of other reasons as well. So in everything we'll go through, and I'll try to run through real quick because there's so much we have to get through tonight. Maybe you guys can have me on later. But every time the church condemns this, there's always a little tiny door for the self-will. If you really love sci-fi deceptions more than the magisterium and Bible and Jesus Christ and the church, there's always a little way you can sneak out of the truth here, which has been made more than clear for us time and time and time again over 2,000 years. You can look at Origen and say, oh no, he wasn't condemned for alien belief. It was for some other ideas kind of connected to it. All I have to do is tweak his ideas and I can still embrace them. And then it happens again later with Pope Zachary, as you said, who also is actually a canonized saint, Pope Saint Zachary. He condemned this priest by the name of Virgil. Now, Virgil recanted of this belief, and he later became a saint. But the point is, he was condemned for at first believing in, and I don't have the quote in front of me. You can find it in, if I leaf through here, I'd find it. But it's in part 2 of the book.
You'll have to leaf through there, Daniel.
I know.
I just want to quickly show the brief contents page. Sorry to interrupt you, just for our audience.
Do, yeah.
they can see basically the structure of the book, which is quite amazing. And the first part is on the biblical case, and then there's the Catholic case. It's very comprehensive, a lot of arguments, goes through all historical arguments as well. The logical scientific case, part 3. Part 4, aliens and the Antichrist, demons and deception, which I hope to talk about today a bit more. And part 5, AI, NHI, and other science, sci-fi deceptions. And then there's also part 6, conclusion, the wise wager, the essential approach, and the supreme mission. And thanks for allowing me to show your book.
Thank you.
This is the Kindle version, but yeah, I encourage everyone to grab a copy.
Yeah, and if you want to just go to the more involved table of contents, you can as well. I'm not worried. You can put on whatever you want on the screen. I'll leave that to you.
That's huge. It's just,
yeah, so I gave you the brief content.
I'll scroll down.
So that's what I'll emphasize real quick before diving more into Pope Zachary. You don't have to read this cover to cover. Don't worry. I'm not expecting you guys to do that. I set it up to be used as a reference work. So there's a very detailed table of contents. You can very easily open up to that and just find the answer to the question you have in mind at a moment. I tried to approach this question from every possible angle imaginable.
Thank you.
So
it's from every possible angle.
I hope I did. I mean, there's more to say, of course. You should see how many notes. You should see my other document of things I had to remove just to keep it under the page limit. Like I've got hundreds more pages I could have put in. Maybe I'll do something else with that later. But anyway, I think I settled everything that I needed to settle here. But anyway, look at that table of contents. You can address what question you need to have addressed, and you don't need to feel the duty to read the whole thing cover to cover. I'd be honored if you did, but no pressure. So, Pope St. Zachary, he says something to the effect of, and you can see the exact quote in there, but he condemns as a perverse and abominable doctrine in opposition to God this idea, and this was this Irish pagan idea. So aliens that, they piggyback on all, it's just the latest mythological guise that the demons wear. But in pagan cultures that hadn't yet been fully Christianized, even in the 700s, this was of course well after St. Patrick's evangelization of Ireland, but there was still the paganism there that Christianity was rooting out. And some of that paganism was this belief in leprechauns and dwarves and all sorts of other creatures living on the underside of the earth. So Virgil starts embracing this idea that there's all sorts of other creatures, other rational creatures, other than descendants of Adam and Eve. And they're living on this other part of the earth called the antipodes.
Like physical, bodily creatures.
Right. Actual incarnate intelligence. So that's all I'm talking about here is incarnate intelligent creatures. The only incarnate intelligent creatures are descendants of Adam and Eve. In other words, humans. I've got nothing to say on the possibility of irrational incarnate life elsewhere, or of who knows what amazing interactions the angels could have on other planets. My goal is not at all to demystify the cosmos. In the last time I came on, this was probably last year, but you brought up the quote from Valtorta, and that could easily be seen as simply either irrational creatures or the interactions of angels with the planets, or kind of symbolic description of the cosmos. Certainly not an endorsement of aliens. But anyway, with Virgil, this priest, endorsing this idea of actual incarnate beings, literally living somewhere else, they actually existing and not being descendants of Adam and Eve. Pope St. Zachary condemns this as a perverse and abominable doctrine in opposition to God, and that if Virgil didn't repent of it, he would have to be defrocked and stripped of his priestly duty. This is how evil. So what the alien believers today do is they say, oh, I'm not talking about men on another side of the planet like Virgil was. I'm talking about men or not men, aliens on a different planet. To which I respond, okay, you slightly tweaked it. And how did that make a perverse and abominable doctrine in opposition to God? Okay, just because instead of leprechauns on the other side of the world, you're believing in aliens on a different planet. There's no difference. There's no theological difference there. You've asserted the same abominable doctrine that the Pope has condemned. Now, once they realize that that's the case, the alien promoters, they say, okay, well, that was just Pope Zachary's personal opinion. No, first of all, no, it wasn't. It was a response to a dubia. This was sent to St. Boniface. Pope Zachary was in regular contact with St. Boniface. He chopped down the Thor's oak tree. He was the saint who was really zealous against paganism And Pope Zachary was also very zealous against paganism, so it's very fitting here.
What year was that?
This was in the 700s. Can't remember the exact year, but 8th century. And so that kind of quelled it for a while. You know, alien belief. So we have it in the very beginning of before the church with the ancient Greek pagans. Absolutely no embrace of it in the early church. All the fathers condemned it except Origen, and he himself was condemned as a heretic for that. Fast forward several hundred years, we've got Virgil condemned by Pope Zachary. Fast forward several hundred years more, we've got this mysterious Xananias de Solstia, it was another priest who I have not been able to find out too much about him in my research. But Pope Pius II, and this was the 1400s now, condemned as, again, a perverse doctrine contrary to the faith, this idea that there existed men on another world before Adam. And this is right in Denzinger's compilation of dogmas. So no one can deny that this is magisterial. You can open up Denzinger yourself right now. And Denzinger, for those who haven't heard of it, Denzinger is the most authoritative compilation of Catholic dogmas throughout 2,000 years. It's not itself an act of the magisterium. It's a collection of acts of the magisterium. So this is an extremely important letter, Pope Pius II, if I recall correctly, 1400, saying that this idea that there was another world and other men before Adam, it's completely contrary to the faith. It's perverse. It's abominable. It's basically demonic. Can't remember the exact words Pope Pius II used, but he condemns it in the strongest possible way. And this is clearly magisterial. So what do the alien believers do? Well, they say, oh, I'm not talking about men in another world before Adam. I'm talking about aliens in another world after Adam or something. So it's the same thing. They're making these meaningless modifications to what was condemned, but they're holding to the same substance of the condemned proposition and pretending it's okay, which of course it's not. There's all sorts of other ways they try to sneak out of church teaching here. They try to redefine the word human or redefine the word nature or world or man or unique or all or visible, as some theologians have tried to do. They try to pretend that visible doesn't mean visible or that all doesn't mean all. Instead of droning on for many hours about that now, I'll just assure you I have fully refuted all of that in the book. I know many of you have probably already seen certain theologians promoting the idea, certain theologians you thought were Orthodox-minded, just saying that aliens are now among us. They've presented a bunch of arguments on YouTube recently. I have refuted definitively every single one of them in this book. And we'll see what we can get to today, but I just want to throw that out there now. Every single one of them is refuted. Nothing special about me. I'm arguing a very easy case here. Their arguments are terrible.
They really are. Yeah. Go ahead, Ron.
Sorry, I was going to mention some of the arguments talk about the supposed fact that Padre Pio believed in aliens as well as Medjugorje. The Vatican we know has spoken about it recently, and they've got their satellites or their telescopes looking out for alien life. And can you speak about that a bit?
Oh yeah,
and other people as well, like that they may have believed in aliens.
Yeah, and really
Catholic personalities or saints.
Right, and this is really, if you really look at what the Catholic alien promoters are saying today, you realize that it's actually this that their whole argument is built on, and they insist it's not. They insist that this is just a random point they're making, but every time they promote their thesis, one of the first things they say, one of the first videos they always make, one of the first claims they bring up is, oh, but Padre Pio believed in aliens, so it must be okay. So clearly they are building their case on this premise. Even that's not what they'll say, but that's what they're doing. If Padre Pio said it, it must be true. And I love Padre Pio as much as anyone, but he did not say this. I'm sorry, he didn't. And I have a lengthy appendix on this point, and I'll give you just the gist of it right now. But please consult the appendix for all the details, because I did a huge amount of research for this, because I knew as soon as I heard the claim that Padre Pio was saying that, oh, there's all these other planets and earthlings are nothing. Earth is nothing compared to them. That I just knew, because I know Padre. I feel like I know him spiritually, and I just knew he didn't say that. Yeah. And yes, that was a priori, that was prejudiced, whatever. I knew it. So I did the research and I realized he didn't say it. So there's, first of all, virtually all of these claims come from Monsignor Corrado Balducci, who died in 2008. And remember, I've got a whole big chapter on the book on him. I don't know what else to say, but he became himself under a major demonic delusion. He himself was an exorcist, even. So, and then that's not at all surprising. That can happen. An exorcist can come under a delusion from one of the demons he casts out, and that something like that happened with Balducci. I'm not trying to diagnose him spiritually, but looking at what he said, he was unbelievably deceived. I mean, he declared himself the representative to the star peoples. He said the aliens were coming to save us. He said the human nature is pathetically spiritually unevolved, and he said we're the lowest rung of the universe, and we're the worst. Like, just, you can't imagine how twisted the stuff that this priest was saying. It was so diabolical. And he encouraged the most diabolical ufologists we have to this day. He encouraged Whitley Strieber, who anyone with an ounce of common Christian sense can read the account of and realize that's demonic. And I've got a whole chapter on Strieber in the book too. So Whitley Strieber is the most famous abductee. It's beyond obvious that he simply was tormented by demons. Strieber was encouraged by Balducci to insist to say, no, this can't possibly have anything to do with demons. I'm a demonologist. I'm a theologian. I know everything. That was Balducci's whole approach. He thought he was infallible, and there's plenty of other theologian exorcists who think they're infallible because of their degrees and the fact that they once served as exorcists. So Balducci came under this delusion that he was infallible. So the demons love that. If there's anything they love, it's pride. And they blinded him completely to the very possibility that demons had anything to do with anything related to aliens and ufology. Even some of the Catholic alien promoters today will admit that, yeah, demons could be some of this. But for Balducci, you had to dogmatically rule that possibility out. He was afraid of going there. It was weird. It was really weird. There was something deeply wrong with this man. And I pray he repented of this before he died. And I do pray for him. But anyway, most of this Padre Pio stuff and John Paul II stuff, almost all of these claims come from Balducci. In fact, all of them do. I've traced every citation I have found anywhere. I've spent so much money buying all the books that quoted this. I traced every citation out. They all bottleneck into Balducci. So we're going completely on his unreliable word with all these claims. But I'm not just going to write it off on that. So Balducci cites a certain book, Così parla Padre Pio, published in the 1970s by a priest, I believe it was Father Costello, I think was his name. Anyway, Father Costello relays this alleged conversation that somebody privately had with Padre Pio, where Padre Pio allegedly said they were aliens. At no point does it say who this conversation's with. So it's pure anonymous third-hand hearsay. We've got someone who we don't know who it is, allegedly relaying a conversation that Father Costello puts in this book. This book has been out of print for ages. No one can find it. It's like no one who is quoting this has the book. Everybody's going through Balducci for it. Balducci's paper that he wrote decades ago. And all of that is contradicted by another book. Now, the problem is the most famous Catholic ET promoter right now, he's blatantly misquoting this other book. He's just and I'm not accusing him of deceit here. I think he just made a mistake. But there was a later book in the 1990s that clearly relays the exact same conversation Padre Pio had about aliens. Now, this book actually does say who was having the conversation. It was, let me see. It was it's okay. If you have the book, you can look at page 696. I have this bookmark here. So this later book, published in the 1990s, was published by it was called La mia vita vicina a Padre Pio by Cleonice Morcaldi. So she was the one actually recounting these conversations this time. So the 1970s book, Così parla Padre Pio, that claims that Padre Pio said there were aliens, anonymous. We're never told who allegedly heard this. Now, the later book, we actually are told who the witness is. It's this woman, Cleonice Morcaldi. She recounts the exact same conversation, but there is no claim from Padre Pio in this conversation that he believed in aliens. It's gone.
Can you briefly tell us a little bit about that conversation? What were the
in this conversation,
comments?
It's the exact same thing. And this is just maddening to me because we've got all these thousands, if not millions of people believing that Padre Pio believed in aliens, and that's why they do. I mean, ask any of these people who've heard these YouTube videos, and they'll give their first reason as to why they believe in aliens, because Padre Pio did, and he didn't. So In this later book, which actually is trustworthy, because we actually have a name of the person who heard who was recounting Padre Pio say this, he said, Morcaldi said to Padre Pio, "When I was told the planets are inhabited, my faith was shaken." And then she recounts Padre Pio's enigmatic answer, which I understand that some people would take as a concession that aliens exist, but it wasn't. And Padre Pio here is recounted as saying, "And what? Don't you wish there were other beings, that God's omnipotence had been limited to this little planet of ours?" So these are rhetorical questions. And I believe that Padre Pio was simply testing her. He would do that. He could read souls. I mean, I think he saw that there was something going on here. And I think he read her soul and was testing her with some rhetorical questions to see what her response would be. So what Mercaldi is basically saying here, and I'll finish the conversation in a second. She's saying implicitly that she finds aliens incompatible with Catholicism. That's what she's saying by saying my faith was shaken when people told me the planets were inhabited. So Padre Pio responds with those questions I just quoted. But then she responds not by saying, "Oh, yeah, I do want there to be all sorts of aliens. I do want there to be galaxies filled with other civilizations." That's not what she says. She responds by saying, "I am full of doubts. I'm afraid I no longer have faith." So she's not agreeing suddenly that aliens make perfect sense. She's kind of reiterating the opposite. She's saying, no, this doesn't match up with my faith at all. So what do you think Padre Pio would say after that if he really believed in aliens and he believed that they were fine and good and in line with the faith? He would say, no. Mm-hmm. There are aliens. The Earth is nothing. And, he would have said what the earlier book falsely recounted of him. Instead, the real conversation is here, recounted by Mercaldi. And all he says is, "Rest assured, the Lord shines in your soul." So I think she just passed the test there. I think that she does have faith. So if Padre Pio is assuring her that actually you do have faith, and you were right to realize there's a contradiction between the faith and belief in aliens. I think now Padre Pio, this was a private conversation. He never meant for this to be public. So she recounted this, so now we have to deal with it. But I think that this was a private thing. I mean, we know it was a private thing. We know that Mercaldi here was recounting a private conversation. And what I think is that Padre Pio sensed something going on in her soul there, and he had to test her a bit. And I think she passed the test by not believing in aliens. Mm-hmm. So the earlier book, that quote, we have no grounds for believing it at all. It's clearly a remarkable saying. Now, I deal with other possibilities also in the appendix. I don't want to waste the whole night here going into all possible interpretations. Yes, there's other possible avenues. I address all of them in that appendix, and you'll see that none of them lead to us to any reason to believe in aliens. With John Paul II, it's even less. We've got nothing from him, and I again traced the citations as far back as I could, and there's nothing. It's all just Balducci claiming that John Paul II said to some child in an offhand remark that that aliens are God's children or something. That's not in any account anywhere. I found the Vatican's own official account of that exact event, that exact parish visit that John Paul II did. There's nothing about this alleged conversation. So what the alien promoters do is they say, oh, no, the catechism can't possibly rule out aliens, and it does. Clearly, I've got a chapter proving definitively that it does. And yes, I know that there are people saying, oh, it can be reformed, it should be reformed. When a theologian tells you that some verse in the catechism should be reformed because he knows better, leave that person aside for the rest of your life, because he's a deceiver. Mm-hmm. So the catechism has seen dozens of revisions, and none of them have ever touched this verse, paragraph 365, that proves there's no aliens. And some people have mischaracterized my argument that it's just that catechism verse. No, I've got 100 different ways of disproving aliens. That's just one of them, but it does work. Paragraph 365 of the catechism does disprove aliens. Anyway, what the alien belief promoters do is they say, oh, if anyone understood what the catechism was saying, it was clearly John Paul II. And since he believed in aliens, the catechism can't possibly rule them out. We have no reason to believe that John Paul II believed in aliens. We've got one claim from Balducci of an event that almost certainly didn't happen, because there's no evidence of it anywhere aside from Balducci's claim. And he's about as unreliable a source as there possibly is. There's no actual recorded exchange anywhere reliable that indicates that John Paul II said there were aliens. That's a castle built on sand. I mean, that's too generous. As I say in the book, I think it's like trying to build a castle floating midair. There's no grounds at all. And it's the same for, I mean, there was one minor claim about Paul VI, but it's almost nothing. I mean, even the alien promoters don't claim that he claimed there were aliens. So there's not much to address there. So we've got all these saints back to the fathers disputing aliens. We've got scripture clearly disputing. We've got magisterium after magisterium after magisterium disputing it. We've got private revelation disputing it, which maybe we can get into also. Yep. We've got the most diabolically deceptive movement that's probably ever been seen in the history of the world, which anybody can see if they honestly observe it, which is why I took a whole part of the book to do precisely that, to lay it out. Like, I didn't do nut picking. I didn't find just the crazy people. I took just the most famous representatives of alien belief in ufology, and I said, here's what they're teaching. If this isn't the doctrine of demons, nothing is. Everything about the alien belief movement, ufology, it's diabolical to the core. All of it. It's rotten to the core. So it's condemned time and time again. It's rotten to the core. It's apocalyptic, which we'll get into in a moment. Mm-hmm. And these alien belief promoters, they want to say, oh, no, it's all fine. Because of a bogus quote from Padre Pio that never happened, and a bogus quote from John Paul II that never happened.
And can you tell us a little bit about Medjugorje? Was there a claim that one of the seers spoke about aliens? I'm not sure.
And this again is not anywhere in the Medjugorje messages, so I don't know how much credence it deserves. Now, I do believe in Medjugorje, of course, but this particular exchange is recounted. I can't find exactly the original source, so I put it in the book there just to address it, just in case it's authentic, and I have no idea if it is. But allegedly, one of the seers asked Our Lady if there were aliens, and her response was something to the effect of, it is not for you to know that now, or something. So basically, she said, it's not, I can't tell you that right now. And amazingly, we've got the alien belief promoters taking that and saying Medjugorje says there's aliens. I mean, and with the Padre Pio and the JP2 stuff, it's just bogus garbage that has no evidence at all, and it's clearly wrong. But with the Medjugorje thing, for someone to say that Medjugorje says there's aliens, that's diabolical deception. They just outright lied to your face. Someone who says that, someone who believes in Medjugorje and believes in that quote, and also says that Medjugorje says there's aliens and they're walking among us now, he just proved himself a diabolical deceiver who you should have nothing to do with ever again. Even if that exchange did happen, I believe that it was clearly simply the case that Our Lady was not given permission at Medjugorje to settle this question because it's a test. And I have a whole chapter on that. I believe this is the apocalyptic test. And I would love to make it easier for us, but she would never do anything outside of God's will. And until God gives her permission to answer this question even more definitively, she's not going to do so. Now, if indeed this is an authentic exchange, and if indeed Our Lady said in response to, I think it was Marija, but I can't remember off the top of my head. If indeed she said, it is not, I cannot tell you that now, or it is not for you to know now, or whatever. Consider how blatantly contradictory that is to the idea that aliens are already among us. They're buzzing our skies in droves, and we really should know they're here, but the government's just trying to cover it up, which is what all the alien promoters are saying, including the supposedly Orthodox Catholic theologians. They're saying, yeah, the aliens are already here. We just need to realize that. We got the alien skulls. We got evidence in the Bible, which is all diabolical deception. But they're saying the aliens are already here, and you got to realize it. You got to welcome them as our saviors, which is what they're saying. Even the supposedly Orthodox Catholics, this infiltration. This is why I'm one of the many reasons I'm convinced this is the deception of the Antichrist. Mm-hmm. The deception of the Antichrist will penetrate right into the heart of the church. Even many so-called Orthodox Catholics will succumb to it, as they are today. So for someone to believe in Medjugorje, believe in that exchange with Our Lady, and say that aliens are among us, they're living a double life. Because they're saying that quote starkly contradicts the notion that aliens are already among us, and we should be able to recognize that easily. Because then it clearly is time. If that were the case, if they were right, then it is time for us to know that there are aliens, because they're already here trying to talk to us, and we're just ignoring them or whatever. So it's this cognitive dissonance, which is the most charitable way I can put it, because that's a psychological problem, and I fear it's much deeper than psychological. I fear this is a spiritual, apocalyptic, diabolical deception. But the minimum, it's a psychological cognitive dissonance. They're living double lives, these ET promoters, and they don't even realize it because they haven't even looked at what they're saying. And yet I would love to be able to just ignore it, but I can't, because they're proclaiming it on the rooftops to millions. So now I
Loudly.
come and counter them.
And thousands of people are being are being deceived. And this
Yeah.
whole question, I just love what you just said about Medjugorje and this being a test.
Mm-hmm.
God tests us in many ways, tests our faith, tests our belief. It's for our good. It's to solidify our faith. And again, the evil one is trying to distract us, destroy our orthodoxy, and unfortunately there are people, and what you just said about psychological, I think it can be both psychological and demonic, and I
Right.
think that we're seeing that in some people. It's both. It's not just one or the other, although this is in the evil one's best interest to for us to believe this and for us to fall into this, into this hole of, oh yeah, well, there's other things, there are many things that I'm sure the Blessed Mother has not been able to tell us.
Right.
She didn't tell Conchita. She didn't tell, there are lots of things that she didn't tell us. And there's lots of ways that we're being put to the test. So thank you so much for saying that, because I think sometimes we miss that. We think in our human will, well, we're entitled to know the answers. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Fess up. It's just our human nature that's, our human will that thinks that we're entitled to whatever. God's entitled to dole out his wisdom and his knowledge in whatever way he chooses. And I think, of course, this is one of the things that I find so wonderful about the divine will, is in some ways we don't have to worry so much about that, because we know that Jesus is going to give us this knowledge and this insight. The Holy Spirit leads us. But it's tragic to in my mind. It's tragic to see the many people, and some of them were theologians that I really respected. I studied in college. I mean, these were people that I thought, were pretty solid coming out with this. It's not the government trying to deceive us. It's Satan trying to deceive us.
Right.
And he's very good at that. Very, very good at that.
And the problem is the government is going to realize soon that this works out really well for them too. And I think they realized that some time ago.
It falls right into this whole New World Order. Let's distract.
Well, that's the thing. When the human psyop, when the human government orchestrated deception joins with the diabolical deception, that's when it hits the fan. That's when the great deception welcomes the Antichrist.
Exactly.
And I think it's everything I look at, I see that's what's brewing. But and with the divine will, that's in part 6, I talk, because I don't want anyone to come away from anything I say or write thinking that their call is to now be afraid. Absolutely not. I have no fear of aliens appearing as demons. I'm not even slightly afraid of that. And it's not because I'm holy, because I'm not holy. It's because I'm a knucklehead. But I realize that I do trust in Jesus. I realize that anything that appears to me as an alien is actually just a disguise worn as a demon, the disguise worn by a demon. If I bid it depart in the name of Jesus Christ, it will flee. And I know that. I'm certain of that. And yes, I am certain there are no aliens. So I know that any alien ploy is a demonic one. And the demons, and I've got a whole chapter on this as well. The demons can easily, and they
manifest,
were given leeway at a certain year. And I'm sorry, there's something blocking my screen from seeing too well what you put in the bottom there. But
it just says can also man-made demons trick you? Like, are there hybrids or genetically created creatures that can be, considered, people might be tricked into thinking that they're aliens?
So I don't, there are certainly grotesque experiments going on, absolutely. And they will create certain monstrosities, and I've got a small section in the book. I'm very convinced, I should say, to be grammatically correct, that every single rational being, without exception, every single incarnate rational being without exception is a human, and every human is 100% human. I don't believe in demon human hybrids, and I when with Genesis 6, I stick with the traditional Catholic interpretation of that, which I've got a whole appendix on in the book. It's not a reference to demon human hybrids. It's not. That's weird. That's from apocryphal Jewish myths in the Book of Enoch and other things. But And I don't believe that there will ever be an animal human chimera. That they're trying that, but every single attempt that they make will either be an injured animal that's still an animal, or an injured human that's still a human. So yeah, I can't pretend to know exactly what they'll throw at us in the future when it comes to the human technology messing with stuff. It'll be weird, I'm sure, and it'll be messed up. But if it's an incarnate being and it has reason, you must understand it's a human being. It needs to be baptized. It has an immortal soul. It has a guardian angel. It has inalienable, infinite, intrinsic dignity. So as grotesque as it might appear, as he or she might appear, we got to regard that person as a person, no matter what happened to him, unfortunately, in evil men messing with their genetics. So there will be horrible deceptions in the coming times. But if a non-human entity approaches you with reason, it is a demon. If it's an angel, it will clearly reveal itself as an angel. It's not going to try to deceive you, because angels are confirmed in grace and they cannot deceive. They would never deceive. So get rid of this idea in your head that, oh, aliens might just be angels and they're coming, maybe they are coming to save us. No, an angel will appear as an angel. It will not deceive you. It will not pretend it's an alien. Anything that pretends it's an alien is a deceiver, because aliens don't exist. It's a demon in disguise. And demons can easily, people don't understand what demons can do. Like and it's perfect.
You mentioned, sorry to interrupt you, but you mentioned this is basically related to what you're saying in the book about Aleister Crowley and his demon alien or whatever. I can't remember the exact wording, but can you tell us about that? Like, is that similar to
everywhere
what
you
saying?
look at this, the demonic arises. It was scary to me, because like I knew this. And I believe I had a spirit-led conviction coming into this, but it was almost frightening to me to see how every single avenue I researched on this confirmed the demonic nature of it. The most common so-called alien, it's the grays, the big slanted eyes you see in it's the most common form of alien. That originally came to be from a demonic apparition to Aleister Crowley, the self-declared beast. He declared himself the evilest man to have ever lived. The foremost occultist of the early 20th century. He drew this demon that appeared to him, called it Lamb, and it was the Greys. It was the prototype for all of the Greys that would follow in the decades that came after. And that's not even the only connection. Aleister Crowley said he handed his baton in the 1940s. Maybe it was even 47. And I got to talk to you guys about the year 1947, because I was
going to mention that as well.
I've got quite a thesis here to lay out in not too long here. My goodness, time is flying by.
You have to cut it, Daniel. There's just way too much to digest.
I mean, it's unbelievable what's playing out before our eyes. And I don't want to come across as flippant. If I kind of laugh a little bit, like if I seem joyful, it's not because I relish evil, not at all. It's not because it's because
Daniel,
the triumph.
To go back to Aleister Crowley. Yeah, I just want to get a very concrete answer kind of thing. So the demons that he was supposedly interacting with, were they in physical form? A lot of people say, because I think he drew them, and people say that demons come up in physical form during Satanic rituals and things like that, Illuminati rituals. Can you speak about that? Is that true?
You have no way of knowing if something is a truly incarnate creature versus a corporeal form that a demon is temporarily assuming in the moment. There's no way. Only a protracted analysis can do this. So what a lot of people don't realize is the demons can mess with light as it goes through the air. They can mess with electrons as they go through the circuitry. They can mess with sound waves as they go through the air. All of these things that demons can do. So they can easily mimic all of the UFO phenomena. But they can also do something else. And I drew from authoritative experts in demonology in the book when I pointed these things out. They can also temporarily assume a corporeal form. They can actually take molecules that exist in the world and arrange them in such a way that it appears that they are a certain physical creature. So that's not just an illusion of the senses. They can mess with your senses also, of course. And they can't directly access the mind. Nothing can do that. They can't directly access the will. Nothing can do that but God. But they can access the imagination, because that's largely neurochemical. And they can mess with what you see that way. But they can also, in the objective physical world, assume a material form. Even the angels did that in the Bible, for example, with the book of Tobit, the three angels that appeared to Abraham, and other cases. That doesn't mean they were physical creatures. They're not. It's Catholic dogma that angels and demons are purely incorporeal, 100% invisible. That's Catholic dogma. So these theologians suddenly saying, "Oh, the Catechism is wrong" by referring to all visible creatures, they're crazy. I mean, they don't know what they're talking about. The Catholic teaching is very clear on this, that angels, and unfortunately some Eastern Orthodox aren't aware of this, so they struggle on understanding the nature of this. But Catholic teaching is clear. All angels, all demons are 100% invisible, 100% incorporeal, 100% immaterial. So any being that is in its nature physical is not a demon or an angel. But you could interact with something that seems to be physical. Perhaps Aleister Crowley did interact with these demons in a way that he regarded as physical, but they weren't. If it was a demonic thing, it was not physical. It was a demon assuming a corporeal form for a time. Now you might say, okay, well, then what could a demon not do? It's temporary. That's the point here. Mm-hmm. Now, a demon retains its angelic nature. A demon in rebelling against God, going from an angel to a demon, it didn't lose any of its nature in that. It lost sanctifying grace, of course, and it's now eternally bound to God's leash. No, a demon can never do anything that God doesn't allow it to do. But we know from Scripture there will be a strong delusion where the demons are allowed to do all sorts of things they previously didn't. We'll get to that later. But when it comes to this assumption of a corporeal form, it won't leave behind evidence that endures, that you can study in a lab, for example.
Okay, can I stop you there? Sorry, yeah. I don't want to interrupt you,
but how about I'll just drone on and on if you don't, so thank you.
Sorry, how about all these supposedly dead alien bodies that they've found in Roswell and all that? Can you tell us a bit about that? So there's so many questions about that. These are the questions that people are asking.
Yeah. So this is where the whole alien belief thing just blows up in its own absurdity. We've got thousands, if not millions, probably millions of claims related to UFOs and aliens, all of which can easily be described in relation to the capabilities of demons. And then on the other side, when you've got those claims related to things that probably couldn't be explained in relation to demons, because I'll acknowledge, I'm not just going to dogmatically say anything that could possibly happen is demons, because I recognize that there's some things they can't do. They can't work a true miracle. They're not incarnate. They can't become incarnate. So, and that actually makes my thesis stronger. My thesis is falsifiable, and yet it's never been falsified. Their thesis is unfalsifiable. There's nothing that could happen that will make them not believe in aliens. Anyway, I have a whole chapter on that too. But so for this point, all of these claims about alien corpses and alien UFOs, there isn't a shred of reliable evidence for a single one of them. So we've got millions of claims of solid testimony related to aliens, all of which can be explained in relation to what demons we know from Catholic theology can do. And then each claim that pertains to something a demon couldn't do, there's zero evidence for. Every single one has been debunked. And the joke in Mexico last month with Jaime Maussan and the paper mache alien bodies. I mean, yeah, he pretended to do some tests on that. So yes, the deception is growing deeper and deeper. But even most of the ufologists didn't fall for that one. They realized this guy's crazy. I mean, now the problem is it will get harder. They will wheel out much more seemingly realistic alien bodies in the future. I've got a chapter on this also, because I believe there will soon come a time when the government itself starts realizing this is a great psyop. We can institute a more widespread crackdown on civil liberties than ever before by saying there's now an alien threat. They'll wheel out a body. So that's the day of disclosure. That's what the ufologists have been waiting for decades. And I think it will come. And I know, as I say in the beginning of this book, I write this book knowing it's about to be, quote, refuted. I know the day of disclosure. I don't know. I don't know the future, but I suspect the day of disclosure is coming. Where official authorities will wheel out the alien body.
It really follows the tenet of the bigger and more ridiculous the lie, the more people will say, well, it must be the truth. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the biggest, most ridiculous. I mean, I understand why people can, fall into this deception. I clearly do, because honestly, this has been coming at us for decades. Roswell and, all the stuff. And we see our own society becoming more and more and more and more tech savvy, which is what we watched, 50 years ago. Oh my God, I'm giving my age. 50 years ago on Star Trek, we can actually do now.
Right.
That people begin to think, well, yeah, why not?
Mhm.
But again, I really have to say, and we're talking about us kind of laughing about it, but it's very sad, but it's very true that the more ridiculous the lie, um, the more plausible people seem to think.
Because they're ravenous for it. We've been groomed to become ravenous for it for decades, as you said,
Yes.
since Star Trek. It's really since actually this goes back to, I trace it back to the end of the 1800s, which is when this really picked up in fiction.
This has been an indoctrination that's been going on for decades.
Yeah.
It's
And
nothing
of course, it
new.
picked up
It's
hugely in the
slow.
latter half of the 20th century, but it's been going on even longer than that. The society has been grooming us for decades, and I charted out that grooming process very carefully in the book because I wanted people to realize that this has been planned for a very long time. They've been priming us to welcome the aliens, and we have most of the world now ravenous for alien saviors. And if there was something that heralds the Antichrist, I can't even, if I racked my brain to imagine something, I can't think of something that more strongly heralds the Antichrist than the masses being ravenous for an alien savior through decades of sci-fi deception, but now also joined with all this stuff happening in the real world and the diabolical infiltration of this stuff into the church, which of course we know is the devil's ultimate aim, to enthrone himself in the church, for the Antichrist to be enthroned within the church. I mean, everything is converging here in this deception.
Can you talk a little bit, and I don't know because I've ordered the book and it hasn't come yet, but is there something in there? I'm sorry, Ron, I'm kind of diverting here from a little bit, but I'm curious to know what you found from the angelic doctor.
Yes. So St. Thomas Aquinas.
That's another thing that they're throwing out. The angelic.
They keep saying Aquinas. Oh, Aquinas says this and that, so there can be aliens. Aquinas explicitly says there is only one Earth. There can't possibly be more than one Earth. He's categorically opposed to the idea of aliens. Now, the debate wasn't phrased with the word aliens then, but he was well aware of plurality doctrine, which was how it, again, as I said earlier, that's how the debate happened from the beginning of the church, and he rejected it absolutely. The problem is the Catholic ET promoters, they take this isolated thing from the Summa, where Aquinas was speculating about what was logically possible for God to do. And they take one little thing about what he said it was logically possible for God to do, and they twist that perversely into this thesis that there actually could be multiple incarnations. And this is the heart of Christianity, the incarnation of Jesus Christ. God became man. That's the greatest thing that's ever happened. And this is really the crux of why this is so antichristic and so blasphemous, that alien belief is almost everywhere in Catholicism. Yeah, there's 100 different brands of alien belief, but the vast majority of them are completely open to, if not outright advocating for, this idea of multiple Christs, multiple incarnations of God. Each planet, each galaxy, or solar system, or whatever has its own Jesus, its own incarnation. And that is so blasphemous. If you have a simple and pious faith, which is what God, the apocalyptic test that's coming, it's not an IQ test. Don't worry. You don't need to be a scholar to pass it. Most of the scholars are going to flunk it.
Oh, and if you're glad to hear that.
Yeah. Most of the scholars are going to flunk the apocalyptic test that's coming. And most of the simple, pious people praying their rosaries and just believing the faith as the catechism and the Bible give it to them, they're going to be fine, easily. And I've had all these emails recently. Oh, if Father Dr. Blank says there's alien, if he falls for this, how am I going to be okay in the times that are coming? And I say to all these people, dude, you'll be fine. If you trust the Bible and you trust the catechism, you stay close to Our Lady, it is going to be way easier for you than for the scholars. And Jesus said the same to Louisa. He said, in when I came to announce the gospel, not one learned one followed me. All the simple did. Same today. It's the simple. So anyway, with Aquinas says, and I love Aquinas. I'm a Thomist myself. I consider myself a Thomist. I'm not worthy of the title or anything, but that's my foundation theologically and philosophically. He says, yes, it's logically possible for there to be multiple incarnations. But then he goes on later to say that's derogatory to the divine dignity to say that that's actually the case. He's rejecting it as theologically illicit. He's just acknowledging he believes it's logically possible. He said that God could have assumed all natures. In other words, every single one of us could literally be Jesus Christ, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, which of course would be so outlandish that no one would even dare to posit it for a second. That would be downright pantheism. That would be idolatry in the worst form. But Aquinas says that also in almost the same page as the point he says the thing about multiple incarnations that the alien believers latch onto, while ignoring how he said it's derogatory to God to claim there could be multiple incarnations, which it obviously is derogatory. In other words, is blasphemous. Jesus, the Son of God, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, has two and only two natures forever, for eternity. This is Catholic dogma. Jesus did not assume a human nature until the end of time. He assumed it eternally. He has the wounds in his hands and side and feet for all eternity. He has his human nature for all eternity. He truly assumed a human nature, only a human nature, not a Marsian nature, not a Neptunian nature, not an Alpha Centauri nature, a human nature. And that's it. Don't ever even toy with the idea that there might be other incarnations of God. That undermines the faith so quickly and seductively and diabolically. And it's almost everywhere seen in so-called Catholic alien belief today.
Just one question. Some people might believe that the other supposed alien races don't need salvation. They didn't have an original sin. Can you speak about that?
Right. So that's one brand of alien belief, and that's probably the least common brand because almost all alien believers see them as, just like us. They could be good, could be bad, whatever. But there's a number. The vast majority of the arguments I present in the book about the uniqueness of man, the uniqueness of descendants of Adam and Eve, the uniqueness of Earth and the end of time and judgment, like almost every argument I present in the book against aliens applies just as well to the idea of unfallen aliens. So they're just as validly ruled out. There are no unfallen aliens. There's again, almost every single reason we can disbelieve in aliens applies just as validly to unfallen aliens as to fallen ones like us. But the one thing that the alien belief promoters say, okay, well, at least there's one little thing, one argument against aliens that we avoid by positing unfallen aliens, and that's the incarnation. Okay, so maybe there's only one Jesus Christ. Maybe, like any Christian should say that immediately, but they'll say, okay, maybe there's only one Jesus Christ, but maybe the aliens don't need one because they're unfallen. To which I respond, first of all, I disagree that the incarnation is just a remedy for sin. And I am a Thomist. And I know Aquinas said that, but that was one of his opinions that was wrong. And Jesus tells Louisa clearly that it was wrong. The Blessed Scotus, the entire Franciscan theological tradition says it's wrong. It says that the incarnation was an eternal decree. It was decreed even before the fall. That God said, I am going to make man in my own image, man alone, and I am going to become man. I'm going to unite myself as intimately to man as possible by myself becoming man through a mother. So the incarnation was an eternal decree, and the Blessed Virgin Mary was an eternal decree. That's
the Immaculate Conception.
Yeah.
Was that also considered an eternal decree?
Exactly. And that Immaculate Conception, as of course we know, is absolutely unique. There is no other Immaculate Conception. And if there was an unfallen race of aliens, they'd all be Immaculate Conceptions, which is flatly ruled out in accordance with Catholic orthodoxy. We can prove that from many dogmatic texts, as I do in yet another chapter in the book. But even if we just look at the necessity of the incarnation, I believe, and I'll take this to my death, as much as it goes against Aquinas, I know. And I love Aquinas. He's the best. I'm still a Thomist, but he's wrong on that one. He's wrong on that point. The incarnation was an absolutely eternal decree. It is the supreme, singular, absolute event in all creation, the incarnation. It was planned before creation even began. So God is impartial, though. Anything that he would give to man, he would also give to an alien made in his image. There's no reason for God to be partial towards man over and above another race of rational incarnate creatures, an Alpha Centauri or whatever. So we have no theological grounds for claiming something about man, but not also about some alien race. And yet the proper Catholic approach rules out that very possibility for any other race but us.
Right.
We how long? I just looked at my clock. And
We've got another 30 minutes, Daniel. I want to switch our focus now towards the title, Heralding the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to introduce that topic by one of the tweets that you've recently put out on Twitter. And you've talked about the importance for us to look out at Israel for when they're building the third temple. And you said that that's a very significant sign of the coming of a great deception as well as the Antichrist. I know that Catholic eschatology doesn't really talk as much about the third temple as Protestants do, but can you tell us a bit more about your thoughts on that and about how that all links in, the third temple, the Antichrist, the alien deception? Is there a link between that?
Absolutely. It's unbelievably converging here. And so with evangelical prophecy, I think evangelicals don't realize the Catholic Church is the new Israel. So they still look to Israel as the recipient of God's apocalyptic eschatological promises, which is wrong. Catholic eschatology also looks to Jerusalem, but not for the same reason that evangelicals do. Evangelicals have this kind of, and God bless them, they're great generally, but they're a bit confused on this because they don't realize that the Catholic Church is the new and eternal covenant. No, we are the new Israel. The Catholic Church is the new Israel. So they still look to literal Israel itself, and they want this rebuilding of the third temple. We, as Catholics, realize there is nothing good about rebuilding the temple because there's no need for it anymore. Every attempt to rebuild it since 70 AD has failed abysmally because God intervened and made it not happen. So the Jews, however, you got to give them this. You got to give them credit for this. After 4,000 years, 6,000 maybe, depending on how you time it, they're still waiting for the Messiah. There's the Orthodox, at least the cultural Jews, they don't care about any of this. But the Orthodox Jews, they're still waiting. They are so ready to welcome the Messiah. The problem is they don't realize he already came 2,000 years ago. So they're ready to welcome the false Messiah. We know from all the prophecies that the Antichrist will ape the things of Christ in every possible way. And when they succeed in rebuilding this temple, I see no reason to doubt that the Antichrist is at the very door, because he'll enter into it when they succeed. And you know what? This is another chapter in my book. One of the biggest movements behind the rebuilding of the third temple is the alien religion, Raelianism. They are this huge religion today with thousands and thousands of members across the world with blatantly anti-Christic beliefs. They believe that they have a revelation from the extraterrestrials and that they need to rebuild the temple in Israel. And they're hugely rich. They're like, and it's amazing how few people know about this, but this is just one of the many UFO ET religions out there. And they are anti-Christic and apocalyptic if there ever was one. So when we actually see this being come, now we know from Catholic prophecy, the Antichrist will just be a man, but we know he'll lie about who he is. He'll be completely under the dominion of Satan. So he'll have all these abilities. He'll be able to work these signs and wonders, especially in the atmosphere, as the prophecies have said. And think back to the Gospels. And I wish I had the verse in front of me, but why did the Pharisees reject Jesus? Sure, a number of reasons, but actually they give their clearest reason in one of the Gospels. Someone can look it up maybe and put it in the chat if they remember it, but where they say, we know where you are from. You are the son of Joseph the carpenter. When the Christ comes, the Pharisees said, no one will know where he came from. Which is not actually a valid prophecy. That's not in the Old Testament. None of the valid Old Testament prophecies say no one will know where the Christ came from. But I believe that since the beginning, these Pharisees have been primed to accept a supposedly extraterrestrial savior, an extraterrestrial Messiah. And I think that the Antichrist might very well present himself as either an extraterrestrial himself, which he won't be. We know he's just a man, again, given preternatural powers by Satan, or a vessel or a messenger of the extraterrestrials, or a man in contact with them or something. But I think it's quite likely that this extraterrestrial deception will play into the welcoming of the Antichrist. And I'm going to look at the other prophecies, and almost all of them actually in Scripture and even private revelation, we see them converging on this ET deception. With the There, I've got a bunch of things here I want to touch on. I'm trying to figure out how many I can fit in. So how long do we have here? When do I have to be? When do you kick me out?
minutes. Around 20, 25, 30
We got
minutes.
about 20 minutes. Okay.
37 seconds. No.
All right. So what I wanted to get into before, and I won't now, but I'll just say for the sake of time, it's in the book. Jesus' words to the servant of God, Luisa Picaretta, repeatedly rule out aliens. I mean, for someone who promotes the divine will revelations to also promote aliens, I don't know what to say other than that such a man is leading a double life, because you can open up, and maybe some just haven't read them all, but for someone who has read all of Luisa's revelations to also promote aliens, that's diabolical disorientation.
So I've got the quote there. I think it's in your book. It says, in the whole creation, this is from Servant of God, Luis Picaretta. In the whole creation, only man has reason.
Yeah. And that's
like
how
that.
I sound. That's, I think, let's see. So that's the chapter title there. And that's just because I had so many different quotes to choose from. I didn't know which one to put as the chapter title. So if you look through that chapter, you'll see a section, I guess it is. You'll see a bunch of Jesus tells Luisa that there's a great difference between the creation of the whole universe and the creation of man. He says, man was created in our image and likeness. This is why we love him so much, because man is not only our work, like all the rest of creation, but he possesses our life. He says, all of the universe was created only for man. In another message, he says the only purpose of creation, which means the whole material universe, was that man was for man. And like I've got and I deleted half of this because it was too long. So I've got
There's a lot. There is a lot in the writing.
After passage. Jesus says it's only man that bears my image. It's only man that has reason. It's only man that I love. It's only man that I made the whole universe for. It's like you can almost open up Luisa randomly and you'll come across a passage like this.
You read the writings, you understand the enormous.
Yeah, it's just constant. So I don't know what's going on in those couple, and there's very few, and I don't want it at all. It's just a couple divine will promoters also promoting out. I don't know what's going on in their heads and their souls. I'll try not to guess at it, but it's not good. Anyway, I bring up Luisa now because this factors in hugely to the apocalyptic deception here with the Antichrist. Jesus would frequently tell Luisa that she was holding something back. Like there's one passage I would have included it if I could have found a space where he says, "What will happen when the music stops?" It's this enigmatic phrase, and Luisa says, "What do you mean when the music stops?" And Jesus tells her, "Your music, your sufferings as a victim soul, it's like music to my ears. But when I take you to heaven, in other words, when she dies, that music will stop. What will happen then to the world?" And there's all these other cases where he says to Luisa, "You're holding something back with your sufferings. When you're no longer on earth, I can't hold it back anymore." Now, when did Luisa die? Do you remember, Debbie?
1940.
I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, you are putting.
Is it 47?
Mm-hmm.
No, can't be 47.
What else? 1947.
I couldn't remember if it was 7 or 8. Yeah.
That's okay. You were
40s. I didn't know that. I just guessed it because I know that you talk about 1947.
Oh, you saw that in the book. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else happened? So she died in March of 1947. What happened just weeks later, just a couple months later?
Something happened to Pope Leo, didn't it? There was an apparition that he had.
I want to bring that up too. Yes, you're reading my mind here.
No, I've just browsed through your book, so I know a little bit about it.
In the world in mid-1947, with respect to what we're talking about here. You said it earlier, Debbie, with the UFO craze.
Yes.
Someone's going to put it in the chat. Someone's going to beat us too.
Roswell or something?
Roswell.
Roswell,
so I did a bunch of research on this. Like, there's actually a lot of scholars, professional scholars who like study ufology. It's great. Like, no one's really mined their stuff until like all the ET promoters now, they don't quote these guys at all for some reason. Actually, I know why. It's because what these scholars are finding doesn't jive with. You
can't back it up.
But anyway, what all these scholars have found studying the ET phenomenon is that it exploded out of nowhere in June 1947. Like, there was 0 flying saucer sightings before Kenneth Arnold and Roswell in June and July of 1947. Nothing. And then in the months after that, hundreds across the world. something changed in 1947. Some sort of, so you can believe in aliens and say, oh, suddenly they just decided to start appearing across the world in 1947, and that, which makes no sense theologically, philosophically, logically, scientifically, politically. It makes no sense, and I approach it from every angle possible here. Or you can realize that something happened with the devil in 1947. He was given a longer leash. And what was Pope Leo XIII shown in 1884, if I recall correctly? He was shown a conversation between God and Satan, right? And what did Satan say? He said, give me greater power over souls and more time, and I will destroy your church. And God said, okay, how much time and what kind of power? And Satan said, 75 to 100 years and more power over those dedicated to my service. I believe that 75 to 100 years started in 1947. And that brings us right now to the period of time where it could be broken any point. Now, we know from the prophecies, we got to go through a lot more before Satan's before Satan's reign is broken. We got more chastisements to come, but we know above all, and that's why I said earlier, this is a message of hope. This is why I smile sometimes thinking about this, because I know these are hard. This is all this great deception. It's just a harbinger. It's a bump compared to the glory of the era of peace. It's a speed bump. It's going to be horrible, yes, but it's a speed bump compared to the era of peace. So as Jesus said, raise your head, for your vindication is at hand when you see these events starting. So Leo XIII, Satan, 75 to 100 years. Paul VI, at the beginning of the 1970s. Everybody's heard of his smoke of Satan remark, right? Where he said the smoke of Satan has entered the church. And that's extremely important. And people apply it these days almost exclusively to like liturgical stuff in Vatican II. But really, you got to look at the quote itself. What Pope St. Paul VI said, I don't have the whole quote in front of me, but he said that the smoke of Satan has entered the church through the pagan prophets of science. And he said this right after alien belief started infiltrating the Vatican like never before. The Vatican was never really talking about aliens before the 1960s. This really entered in post-Vatican II with Karl Rahner, especially, and Father Teilhard de Chardin, who was the synthesis of all heresies, as Pius XII called him. He's really the foundation for and then Israel factors in big to 1947 as well. So like everything is converging in these years. And I used to anyway, the smoke of Satan is the pagan prophets of science. That's what Paul VI said. It's not just like a bunch of liturgical stuff. And yes, there's all sorts of things we should be concerned about there too. But it's above all a diabolical apocalyptic deception that's seemingly based on science, but it's not actually. All the astronomers are telling us, oh, with our telescopes, we know that now there's all these aliens and look at all these other planets out there. There must be, and the Vatican was starting to open up to this in the 1960s. And it's right after that Paul VI said the smoke of Satan has entered the church through the pagan prophets of science. And that, I believe, is because of this ET deception infiltrating the church, starting especially in the 1960s. Now, yes, there were Christians speculating about this from the Enlightenment, and I trace every detail of the development of this in the book and yet another chapter of the book. The ET promoters try to use this to their advantage. They say, oh, this isn't just a space age thing, belief in aliens. This goes way back. Yeah, it goes way back, a little bit back to the Enlightenment, when mankind was rebelling against God as never before. You don't see it anywhere before then. So that's a testimony against alien belief, not for it. And I trace out in detail the development of alien belief through the Enlightenment. For example, Giordano Bruno, he was a little bit before the Enlightenment. Mm-hmm. We've been told for the last 100 years, oh, he was condemned for things that had nothing to do with his belief in aliens. Recent scholarship has shown, nope, he was burned at the stake because of his promotion of alien belief. And that was 1600. Mm-hmm. And I'm not condoning anyone being burned. I'm just saying the church took this extremely seriously. And then suddenly at post-Enlightenment, we see this infiltration starting. Anyway, so we've got Leo XIII, we've got Paul VI, we've got Luisa. And then if you look at what's happening in this ufology movement post-1947, it's unbelievably diabolical. So that's why I wanted to devote a whole part of the book to charting out the growth of the ET deception post-1947 in parallel in fiction and in reality. because we've got this myth. That's what Scripture says. The time is coming when men will no longer tolerate sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will wander into myths. And those myths are the sci-fi. And I'm not condemning sci-fi. I've enjoyed plenty of works. I'm just pointing out when this becomes a lens through which you interpret reality, that's when it becomes a deception. These sci-fi myths is what men of the present era are turning towards, because they're no longer excited by Christianity. They're bored by Christ. What they're not bored by is aliens and the Avengers and Doctor Who and Star Trek. That's what they find exciting. So that's what the devil's using. That's the predominant modern myth by far. Sci-fi blows away everything else in terms of the box office income, the domination of society for decades and decades now. So I tried to chart out the growth of this myth, especially since Roswell, but yes, some instances before it, and to see how this is a deliberate trend of ever ascending degrees of evil as all grooming happens. You start simple and then it gets grosser and grosser and grosser as time goes on. And that's exactly what they've done to us as a society with the sci-fi grooming, all in tandem with revelations in reality, with these developments in ufology, suddenly culminating now in just the last couple of years. And you'll be able to check the news in a few days, and there'll probably be some big revelation about this, because now suddenly we're having congressional hearings about it. We're having intelligence officers saying that we got alien bodies. This deception is coming to a head right now, and it's been decades and decades in the making. It's heralding the Antichrist.
Yeah. And again, this tie, as you see it coming into politics, coming into our political world, you could just, I don't know, you could just see the whole new world deception all over it. It's just written all over it. And like you said, it's been coming for a long time. I mean, as a child, we heard about the people, and it was the couple, one very famous couple that were taken up into the spaceship and tested, and
Were those the ones in New Hampshire, or
I think it was in New England. But one of the things I think is so interesting about that is, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way whatsoever, but when you see these people that have been taken up to the spaceship, and they always tend to be people who are kind of on the fringes of society,
right?
From one reason or another. And so, it really calls to question, just in that, just looking at the circumstances of some of these people should have been a big red flag in the first place.
There's always a red flag, even if they're not outright fringes. Sometimes it happens to very upstanding people as well. But you look at what they've been up to, and they've always been dabbling in the occult or the New Age, or they strayed from the faith. The devil's chain was greatly lengthened, I believe, in 1947 with this great deception and Satan's, but it wasn't lengthened infinitely. He's still on a chain because of Christ's sacrifice on the cross. And if you look at the ET deception since 1947, almost never do devout, pious Catholics say that they've been interacting with aliens. It's always someone who's been dabbling in New Age, been dabbling in the occult, wandered into mortal sin, or in some other way. Remember, what did Pope Leo XIII hear? Satan demanding more power over those in my service. And that doesn't mean a Satanist. Anyone's in Satan's service if they have wandered into the occult, into the New Age, if they're living a lifestyle of unrepentant mortal sin. You don't want to hear this maybe, but you're in Satan's service if that's what you've done, if you're living a lifestyle of mortal sin. Those are the people that God gave Satan a greater leash over. Those are the ones who say that they've been in contact with or abducted by aliens. You don't see saintly people ever saying that they're being abducted and talking with aliens. Okay. We've got all sorts of patently false revelations saying that. So, we've had, and Our Lady has been so active this whole time, especially in the 20th century. We've had more apparitions than ever before in history. We've got none of them saying that there are aliens. We've got plenty of warnings in them about apocalyptic deceptions coming, though. About deceptions and demonic wonders, demonic illusions. We can see prophecies of that back in Scripture, even also in the Fathers of the Church. I have a whole chapter on that. But really, what I also want to point out is we've got a number of blatantly diabolical revelations false private revelations saying there are aliens. We've got, they're wildly popular now, the voice and echo of the divine messengers. They've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers on Facebook and elsewhere. I get emails about these people all the time. They present themselves as Carmelites. They are fake. They are not a Catholic order. They have no recognition in the church. They teach blatant heresies. But how did they come to being? They came to being from ufology. And I've got a whole chapter on them too. You got to trace their origins. And they teach that they have revelations from the Andromeda peoples and that we just need to await spiritual evolution. Anytime you hear spiritual evolution in a message, just get rid of it. That's garbage. We've got this false mystic, what's his name? He claimed to receive this mission at Fatima. He's a false stigmatist, and he had the revelations from the aliens saying that there's no hell. And
is he the one that said that the miracle of the sun was a UFO? Or was that someone else?
Huge movement now. And this is so diabolical. Our Lady's greatest miracle of the modern era, the miracle of the sun at Fatima. We got all these, even Catholics. There's one Catholic, Diana Pasulka. She's this wildly popular ufologist. She doesn't call herself a ufologist, but that's what she is, really. She writes these best-selling books. She's got another one coming out in a few weeks. She's supposedly a devout Catholic, and she promotes Jacques Vallée and everyone who says the miracle of the sun at Fatima was actually just a UFO. This is what they want to do. This is what ufology wants to do. It wants to rewrite all Marian apparitions, all mystical phenomena as just UFO phenomena. It's diabolical to the core, every single way you analyze it. And it's breaking my heart that more people don't recognize that. And I hope my book helps more people recognize how diabolical to the core it is. It wants to undermine everything. It even wants to rewrite scripture as just being UFO phenomena. And when you do that, when you start thinking that physically impossible things could be attributable not to supernatural intervention, but to aliens, you've just undermined the faith. That's how we believe in Jesus. He did physically impossible things. If you start believing in aliens, you've got nothing to stop you from believing, oh, well, maybe he just had extraterrestrial technology. Maybe he wasn't the Son of God after all. Maybe he just had an anti-gravity thing in his pocket from the aliens. I mean, when you invite this premise into your convictions, this premise of alien belief, it infects everything immediately. And what does St. Paul say? That in the last days, there'll be scoffers. There'll be those who hold the form of religion, but deny its power. And that's what this deception allows you to do. They'll still go to church on Sundays and recite the creed with boredom. But all the power of it has been demolished in their hearts, because all their excitement, all their actual eschatological wonder and awe and hope is placed not in Jesus Christ, not in the triumph of his will, but in extraterrestrials coming to save us. That's where their real excitement is. And that's why this is so apocalyptically deceptive.
It's mind-boggling, actually, when you think about truly, and there are people that I truly believe were good Catholics, Orthodox Catholics, that have fallen into this rabbit hole.
It's a rabbit hole. That's what it is.
It is a rabbit hole, and you fall into it, and you keep digging in there, and there's always going to be something that you want. If you want to see it, you're going to see it. It's going to validate your belief. And this is where, and I keep coming back to this, but this has just been so true for me, is when we're not living and acting in our own will, we're acting in the divine will, that we can really see this truth. It's when, we're run amok. We are run amok when we are depending on our own will, our own, this is why we have the church. This is why we have orthodoxy. This is why we have the catechism. Is because left to our own devices, we're going to go down the wrong rail. I would say pick a lane. Pick a lane. You can't ride the fence anymore. Pick a lane. Right. And this is the wrong side of the tracks. I truly believe that. And honestly, and what we've been saying about in the writings, the Book of Heaven, it just lays it out so plainly. Over and over and over and over again.
It really does. There's nothing from God leading us to the alien belief.
Nothing. In fact, you're going to see it very plainly that it is not. And I just applaud you for this.
No, to God the glory. I'm just some knucklehead who compiled what you said.
It's amazing. One.
And there's so much more, obviously, we can't get to today, but I just want to throw out there one time again, real quick. I know you've heard people saying that Genesis 4 with Cain being marked, and Genesis 6 with the Nephilim, and Revelation
Yes.
is the stars.
We didn't get to that.
The universe's inhabitants with the Psalms and Cain. And I have refuted all of that completely in the book. And maybe in a future webcast we can get to it here. But
Yeah.
there are answers to all of those claims.
Because that's another big one that's kind of exploded here. But
well, I droned on way longer than I meant to on so many of those points. I apologize. That hour and a half just flew right by.
Oh,
no, there's just
that's okay.
There's just so much to cover, and it's so pervasive.
And I thought I'd be able to condense it more, but I couldn't.
That's okay. We don't really want
So we've only covered like a tiny fraction of your book just in this.
Maybe a few pages
in this podcast.
760 something.
We don't want you to condense it. We want you to come back.
But
anytime. Thank you so much for having me.
When I was browsing through it, something that stood out to me was, I think it was in the chapter about the Antichrist, is how the Antichrist is going to try to ape the church or imitate the church of Jesus. And you talk about communion with aliens, and that's going to be one of their sacraments, or that's how I understood it. Can you end off our talk by telling us a bit about communion?
Ufology. It's aping everything of the church, and it's been doing this for decades. And actually, I'm far from the first to notice this. I'm drawing from the scholars who have dedicated their careers to studying this objectively. They're pointing out that alien belief is the modern replacement religion. Like everybody's, even the head of SETI, the official government search for extraterrestrial intelligence, he openly admits, the founder of it, Frank Drake, he openly admitted, this is my search for immortality. He said that he believes that aliens have the recipe for immortality, and he hopes to contact them with the telescopes. And the current head of SETI says basically, if human beings are the only intelligent beings in the universe, then that means we're a miracle. And if we're a miracle, you're not doing science. So he wants to disprove God. He wants to disprove God's creation of us miraculously. So the whole thing is an aping of the church. And we see that in really every way we look at it. I can't remember where exactly in the book I kind of laid it out, but this idea of communion with aliens, of course, in the true faith, we have communion with Jesus Christ, and the diabolical deceivers who realize that we need communion with the other, they replace that with communion with aliens. And it's no accident. It's no mistake that the most popular work of alien promotion to date is probably a book called Communion by the supposed Catholic Whitley Strieber, alien abductee, who talks about who it's beyond obvious. And I think I can safely say I prove this in the book. It's beyond obvious that he was dealing simply with demons. But he advocates for communion with these beings. And now we've got people like Stephen Greer. Dr. Stephen Greer is one of the foremost ufologists today. He's laying out an actual regimen for how to make communion/contact with these extraterrestrial UFOs. And if you look at what he actually advises, it is a demon contacting session. It is a seance, but it's promoted as a contact with extraterrestrials. And guess who was his motivation? Guess who he defers to in saying that his whole mission here is fine? Monsignor Corrado Balducci. Balducci even gave him an interview and encouraged him and said, no, there's nothing demonic here. This is great. This is true. The diabolical fruits of Corrado Balducci, it's unbelievable. Anyway, so the communion with aliens, the fighting for disclosure is like the prophets. We've got the prayer. We've got it's got a false teaching on our origins. They say we come from the aliens. It's got a false teaching on eschatology, a false hope that we need to now return to them. They're coming back to save us in almost every major way. The whole alien belief movement, the whole alien promotion movement, the whole ufology movement, it apes every essential aspect of the Christian church. And this is exactly what we should expect with the Antichrist, who is the ape of Christ, who will ape everything that Christ does.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's beautifully summarized.
Yes.
Daniel, can you please let everyone know where they could get your book and just remind them of your book's title. There's some people that don't know
Yes,
the
so
title.
and I meant to send you a link before and I forgot. Maybe, I don't know if after the fact we can put one in the description or something. But it's on Amazon, and I'll eventually get it on other booksellers as well. Right, that might take me a bit longer. For now, it's only on Amazon. So it's Only Man Bears His Image. You might find a link in the description. If not, you can just type it into Amazon. Only Man. I can't get that in focus. Only Man Bears His Image. Paperback or ebook. And again, don't let the length scare you. You can easily use it as a reference. I've carefully set it up so you can just have it answer any question you happen to have at the moment.
As I said, mine was supposed to come today. I'm just praying when I get off of here and I go and look at my front porch. Maybe it won't be here today, because if it is, I know I'll be up half the night.
Well, or maybe it'll put you to sleep right away. Maybe it'll be a good.
Yeah, this is just, it's so timely. It's so important. And again, I can't say how much I appreciate the time and the because I know I send emails, and then it's like, 3 weeks I get an email back that says, I'm sorry. How hard you have worked on this project and how long you have worked on this project for all of us to really benefit from it. I just appreciate it so much, because the timing of it couldn't be more perfect.
Yeah, it's happening now. So thank you for that, Debbie, because it was writing this book was one of the biggest crosses of my life.
I know.
I can't even count how many all-nighters I had to pull, and just wading knee deep in the demonic trash that I had to go through. Just unbelievable how evil this whole movement is. But I had to catalog it so people to expose it, because it hasn't been exposed yet from a Catholic perspective. So I hope this book does it. But again, the most important part of the book is part 6. It's the shortest part, and it gives you the good news. All this bad news is important, but the good news is even more important. The good news is that all of this is a herald of the triumph of Christ. He will defeat the Antichrist. The devil is nothing compared to God. The closer these events come, the closer we know we are to the era of peace, the triumph of the divine will on earth as it is in heaven. So you've got absolutely nothing to fear. Sound the alarm bells, yes, for those who would otherwise be deceived, but have no fear, only have excitement that we're now in the times that have been long prophesied. They're coming to fulfillment before our eyes.
Thank you for saying that, because there's nothing to be afraid of.
Nothing.
There really isn't. Satan is on he's on a leash, and he's on a relatively short leash. So don't, but we have to know these things, because we can be so easily deceived, because we want things are so off the rails right now. We want an easier answer. We want a little nicer, fancier, bigger explanation. Like you said, I think people get bored with the creed. They get bored with the they've really understood what it is. How could you ever be bored?
Right.
But that's a convert into me talking.
In times of confusion, stick with what you already know is true. That's the recipe.
Absolutely. That's a good one.
Amen.
And thank you so much for having me again.
We'll have you on again to discuss this topic, because it's a very important topic, and we suspect that it's going to become more and more important as time goes on.
I think so.
God bless you so much.
God bless you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Sorry we couldn't get to your questions. We had so many questions, but maybe next time we could have a Q&A.
Next time, yes. Next time we'll have more question time. I'll drone on less. I apologize for all of it.
Till then.
God bless you. Pray for us.
Bye.
God bless.